Episcopal Church in Little Rock and St. Mark's Church, which nominally has 1,500 on the books. We get about 400 arrive on a Sunday here, but I'm in charge of a choir there and a choral program. I've been there a year. We're developing things. In the 80s, I came over and played the Fort Worth Seminary, so I feel in some ways I'm coming back to my first American trip, and I was very good friends with many of the faculty there. People like David Keith, the Cecil, Millie Roper, some of you know some of those names, I'm sure. And in fact, I gave a recital in that trip down in Temple, which is not far from here. My very first drive in America was from Fort Worth to Waco, and I was terrified. I drove on the wrong side of the road with the steering wheel on the wrong side, and driving back from the church to my hotel one afternoon, I was driving up a service road next to the interstate, and I got to the intersection and suddenly realized I'd driven the whole 5 miles on the wrong side of the yellow line. Nothing had come my way. So there we go, that's who I am. Now, my first session today is, I became aware a couple of years ago of the lack of a need to buy any more music. There's obviously new repertoire to buy, but there is so much now that's out there on the internet, and I thought it would be a useful session for us just to give some idea of some of the websites that are out there, and so that you can go and you can explore yourself. And there are two particularly which I use more than others, which are vast. I have a list coming. I have written out a list of these websites. Many of you probably know about the Choral Public Domain Library, cpdl.org, which is a wonderful resource for choral music. And you can find all sorts of things on there. People submit their own editions of things, and some of them are better than others, and you need to take care when you're looking at that. And some of the organ music websites are similar. There are a couple which I will, when the list comes, I will tell you the ones that have people's own editions. We'll look at some of them possibly on the screen as well. But I put together a little compendium of music, which I have taken from websites, and some of them are pieces which you may find useful. Some of you may know. There are a couple of pieces there which are personal favourites, or one particular personal favourite which is there, and I'll play some of them to you. I won't play all of them, so don't worry. But just to show you what is out there. There are the first site I want to look at is the one that's up on the screen there. There it is. It's the University of Rochester, and it's what they call the Sibley Music Library, and it's a vast resource. And this is just the organ music that's on there. There is all sorts of other instrumental music and everything else that's there. And you can literally just scroll through and find what you want. Henry Smart, for example. And you will find there, you go up to there, you see the PDF, which is the photo file, and you can click on that, and then you then have to wait for it to download, which is usually fairly quick. And then up comes the edition, and you can scroll down. It's someone's very old music library which they put online, some very old editions. You can scroll down and you can find the music you need and just print it out, and there we go. Now there are all sorts of horrors on there. as well as good things. You have to be discriminating when you look and see. But there are occasional gems. I discovered that postlude I played this morning or this afternoon. The Stanford was a piece I found about 6 weeks ago on this site, and it was perfect. It was a real discovery. It's going to be one of my regular repertoire pieces now, and that was where I found that. So several of the pieces I've got from here in this booklet are from this University of Rochester website, and I will perhaps play you some of this music so you can hear what it sounds like, or so you can just hear it as well. That's the first big website that I would recommend to go to. The second one that I have a recommendation for is IMS LP, and I promise you there's a piece of paper coming with this written on, so you don't have to write this down. In fact, here it is. It's IMS LP, which is Petrucci music. Have anyone come across this one? Yeah. This is very similar, and in fact I discovered this through my iPad. If any of you are iPad people, there is an app for this collection, and I live on this on Sunday mornings sometimes, particularly for an 8 o'clock service I have to play for. I play from my iPad quite a lot these days, and it's a very similar idea. If you just put in the search engine organ. All sorts of things then come up, and it's the same idea. Those of you who know the CPDL website will recognise this format. And again, you click on a piece, and I'm just going to pick one at random here. Click on the piece, find the file, complete score, and there it comes up. And I think it's magic. I mean, I grew up I would say when I was at university, I'd have had a wonderful degree if I'd had a computer. Because I'd have written essays much more quickly and fast and had access to all this material. I'm very envious. My 4-year-old daughter gets my iPhone these days and can find a movie in about 5 seconds. So I'm slightly worried for the technology that she'll be dealing with in 50 years' time. Anyway, so there's this wonderful resource of music and everything else that's out there. And those two websites are the ones I particularly recommend. Could I have a copy of that? Sorry. And there are, I think, about 30,000 scores on each of those. If ever you need vocal music, choral music, piano music, violin music, any other instrumental combination, you will find it on those two websites. Some of them are really old editions, and I'll show you this Morris Green. Well, actually, you can see, you don't need to see it. The one or two websites which I haven't noted here reproduce the old original manuscripts, and they're very, very difficult to read from. But if you find one that's there. Now, this Morris Green voluntary I found on the IMSLP website. It's listed as a set of 12 voluntaries. And this is very useful music. The whole English 18th century field is a very useful field for organists, particularly those of us who are a little bit wary about using our feet. Because English organs in the 18th century didn't have pedal boards. They weren't nearly as advanced as the European instruments. Well, they were advanced, but they didn't have the pedal board. So there's a lot of manual repertoire. The Oxford University Press published a wonderful set of old early English organ music from manuals, which is extremely useful. I think that's in 6 volumes. And composers like Morris Green, William Boyce, even going back to a little earlier to Orlando Gibbons, William Byrd, some of those great English composers have provided us with a wealth of material that we can use. It's all sorts of characters. There's happy and fairly rapid. There's something a little bit more meditative if you want something a little bit more meditative. And again, if you know the composer particularly and the style you're looking for, it makes looking at a website like this much more directing. You can find repertoire. So this is the Morris Green voluntary. Now I have to give one caveat to my playing. I arrived very late last night. Well, I arrived late last night because I had a plane didn't arrive in Dallas that should have brought me to Waco, and so my practice time on this organ has been somewhat limited. So I will gradually get to know it as I go. But this is Morris Green voluntary in A major. Sometimes it's a good prelude, it's good offertory. You can play it on 8 and 4 foot, which I was just doing, or you can add 2 foot and make it a bit brighter. It has all sorts of character. You can play that on the piano too. It's really, really useful. And music by, say, William Boyce, Maurice Green. There are all sorts of. There are many, as P.D.Q. Bach said. He described P.D.Q. Bach as one of the many prolific and unknown composers in the Baroque period. So there are many prolific and unknown composers from that period, and it's all useful and very good. The next piece, I have to confess to being a personal favourite, and I found this online, and I thought I need to get the word out about this piece. I'm not sure how well known it is, and S.S. Wesley was one of the great English composers in the 19th century. He was, if I remember rightly, the nephew or great-nephew of Charles and John. He was part of the same family, and became, unlike John and Charles, didn't become a Methodist but stayed an Anglican, and worked in Hereford. His first cathedral job was at Hereford Cathedral in the west of England. Then he went to Winchester and all sorts of things. He wrote some wonderful letters all about life in an English cathedral, again, which I shall reference later. This piece was written when he was in Devon, in the West Country, in a village called Holsworthy. And Holsworthy has a church which rang this melody on its bells. And rather like Handel walking around and listening to a blacksmith humming his tune, which Handel did, Wesley heard this tune and wrote it down. In some parts of England, this used to be sung to "It Came Upon the Midnight Clear." It was something I found out relatively recently. The tune itself, just the first page, is worthwhile as a piece in its own right, because it's a very, very sweet melody. And then he adds a bit of variation to it in the rest of the piece. And I'll just play it through to you. This was my father's favourite piece. My father always set a challenge to any of us in our family who were musicians. And this was my challenge. He had an LP of this. And he told me when I was 13 that he'd only regard me as a true organist when I could play this piece. And I managed to do it within a couple of years. So this is the Holsworthy Church Bells by Wesley. S.S. Wesley. practice for your left hand. Really good practice. Very good combination work. Slow work is extremely valuable. That I think, again, it's useful repertoire which you find. Here's another type of repertoire that's out there. It became very fashionable about 15 years ago. It became very fashionable for organ reciters to rediscover the transcription, the orchestral transcription. In Victorian England particularly, a lot of orchestral music was unavailable to the general public, and organists, by making these transcriptions, could make this music available in these great town hall concerts that they had. And George Martin, this is a composer called George Martin, who was a very fine organist, good friend of Edward Elgar, and arranged a lot of his music. And this is an arrangement, this is part of, I haven't given you the whole thing, it's part of the slow movement that Schumann wrote in his quintet. A wonderful piece. And again, I'm not going to play it all, because you can see how it goes, and if you're interested, you can go and look up the whole piece. There are lots of George Martin arrangements on in the Sibley Music Library. If you look up George Martin as the composer, you'll find a lot of his work. And he's a composer I usually regard as fairly reliable in terms of what he writes and everything else. So I would look that up. I won't play you. I'll just give you a taste of this one. Section which is contrast, but again, I don't think I'd play that as a procession for the clergy. It would be a little bit, or for a choir procession, it would be a little bit ponderous. But again, it's useful material that's there, and that, don't ever be afraid to play arrangements. I know that some organists feel it's a little bit impure to play an orchestral arrangement sometimes. I'm never scared to do that. I play arrangements a lot. Edwin Lemaire is another composer who his work, you'll find him on that site. Edwin, L-E-M-A-R-E. Edwin Lemaire is a composer well worth looking out for any transcriptions he writes. They're really, really very useful. George Martin, W.T. Best is another composer who you'll find on that list. So I'm hoping I'm giving you some pointers to people I think are worth looking for. Okay, let's go on. Now, this next collection I found, was a collection of 12 pieces arranged for the organ. And I don't have the title sheet, which I meant to have, but there were movements from Handel. I know My Redeemer Vivit was one of them, little chacons by some of these Italian composers. And again, I thought this was a really useful set of 12 pieces that's there.
Who's the arranger on this one?
The arranger on this one, I will need to look at my, I would need to find my sheet. And I'm sorry, I will find it. I'll tell you afterwards. I'll find the sheet afterwards. But again, it's just useful. It's useful material. We sometimes just look for repertoire. I don't know about you. Sometimes Saturday night, not very often, I hasten to add, but occasionally on Saturday nights, I'm thinking, what do I play tomorrow? How do I introduce the 8 o'clock service? And that, I say, the app that's on my iPad, which is the IMSLP website, is extremely useful. And you find things like this. Again, you can probably hear this music in your head, but it's just very, very useful to have. Good example of, and you can use, again, you can adapt all this music to an organ with very little pedal, or with some pedal. I think there's all sorts of variations you can make with registration, of little contrast, particularly in this style of music, of little echoes and things like that. And so I put two of those arrangements in this little booklet. The chacon that's there as well is quite useful. I'm always slightly wary of pieces in 3/4, because I don't want it to sound like a waltz or a cabaret club. So pieces in 3 I'm usually fairly reticent about, but I think if you play it with sufficient gravitas, you can be absolutely fine. There's a wonderful story of Geraldo, I think it's Geraldo, the band leader, who was noted obviously for his Latin music, and had a request into his radio show one day from a lady who asked him to play the anniversary waltz for her 60th wedding anniversary. And he announced that, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, we don't often do music in 3/4, but he said to oblige the listener, he turned to the group and said 3/4. So that was, instead of 3, it was 4. Anyway, the next piece on page, it says page 10, is by a composer that I came across as a teenager. Again, music that I got left by an old organist, and I found this again through the this is through the Sibley site. A composer called T.M.E. Patterson, T initial and then M-E-E, Patterson. And it's not particularly profound music. It's not, I wouldn't claim it as particularly great music. But again, I think it's useful. I think it will help fill the time, help fill the space, and it's pleasant to listen to. I'll give you a taste of this. I won't play it all.
was by?
The initial T, and then me, M-E-E, and then Pattinson, P-A-T-T-I-N-S-O-N.
Thank you.
And there are a collection of postludes and there are a collection of preludes as well. And the preludes are very, very straightforward, and very accessible, really accessible. And again, for setting a mood, which is often what we're required to do as organists, I think they set the mood really well. The next composer, some of you may know this piece, I don't know if you know this lovely piano piece. There's a whole collection of Edward Dow pieces arranged for organ. And I love this piece, the Two of Wild Rose. And because he's an American composer, so I'm being international. When I moved to the States 12 years ago, and I've spent 12 years getting to know a whole new world of music. It's not often performed in England at all. It's really interesting how, and I've sent pieces back to England which I think they should know and they should perform. I have a couple of friends who are cathedral organists, and every now and then I send a piece back and say, you have to put this in your repertoire because it's such wonderful music. McDowell is one of those is one of those composers whose music is very, very appealing and attractive. And again, that's, you know, I'm sure that piece is familiar to you. It's just wonderful, wonderful stuff. I play that quite a lot for weddings. I play that quite a lot. I play that for funerals as well. And I think it's just a really beautiful melody. And I put it in there because I think it's an extremely accessible arrangement too. It's one that doesn't require a lot of pedaling, which is always nice. Certainly at 8 o'clock in the morning. It's wonderful. As you can tell, I do a lot of my thinking about the 8 o'clock in the morning service.
Was that on the Sibley side?
That's on the Sibley side, yeah. And I think, you know, there's a certain amount of duplication on them, but the Sibley side seems to be the one that has the most organ music on, and is the one I found most useful.
Eastman was started.
Eastman. It's the Eastman. That's right. It's Eastman. It's the Eastman school. So it's a really, and say, if you want music for anything else, if you want to play a piece with a violin or something, or there's violin and organ, there's all sorts of combinations there. You just put it in the search engine and it will come up. And it really is amazing what's out there. And because the great thing is that these are completely legal. Whereas, you know, we have such fear of photocopying. When I moved to Northern Ireland, and within a month there was a big prosecution for photocopying music, and the guilty party were the police ladies' choir. It's the Royal Ulster Constabulary Ladies' Choir who will fine £20,000 for illegally photocopying music. So it can happen to anybody. Now the last piece in here I've put in as an example. I didn't have time to even look at this when I was going through. And actually these pieces are quite tricky. There was a set of 12 pieces, I think it's 12 or 10, by P.C. Lutkin, who's a composer I hadn't heard of. But they're hymn arrangements, and I know we all love hymn arrangements. And these are really quite fine, and I'm going to sort of dig out, I'm going to, in the course of the next few months, probably learn these. I've given you the one for O Come, O Come, Emmanuel. He arranges the collection according to the church year. So you've got a hymn for Advent, a hymn for Christmas, a hymn for Holy Week, a hymn for Easter, a hymn for Ascension, if you observe these feasts, a hymn for Trinity Sunday, and it goes through. And Holy, Holy, Holy is in there. There's a really rather fine arrangement of Crown Him with Many Crowns, which is really
Is
well.
this the same guy, the Lord bless you and keep you?
It could well be. Yeah.
I know his last
Yes.
name's Lutkin. I'm not sure if it's a...
It could well be. It's well crafted music. I mean, it's someone who knows what he's doing has written that music. And so there's a little collection of things some of which you may find useful. Yeah.
What's the time on the collection?
It's hymn arrangements. It's just called hymn arrangements. I think it's 10 hymn arrangements by Lutkin. And again, if we can find it. So when you get onto the UR research page, you come down here and you'll find what you want. Eastman School of Music, Sibley Music Library is what you want there. Click on that. And then I just put organ in as my search item. And there it comes. And I think if you put, let's try this.
Back composer, alphabetical, or?
Yeah, I think if you put Lutkin in there, it will come up. There he is. Hymn tune transcriptions for all. There we go. It's a fairly big file, but there it is. So the slightly awkward ones are the ones that are written in this format. There's the O Come and Coming Manual. And that can go through. And then it's got Hark the Herald Angels Sing.
They're mostly in this landscape format, is what you're
Yes,
saying.
it's in a landscape format. As with Gladness Men of Old. But photocopiers are wonderful things these days and will make books for you. 40 Days and 40 Nights, which is, again, I think these are all useful tunes. Jesus Christ is risen today. How often do we need something different at Easter? Crown Him with Many Crowns. And that is rather fine arrangement. Holy, Holy, Holy.
They're all in very high keys of
They
your,
are.
you know,
Yeah, you can
the
sing.
British keys of
The British keys,
Yeah.
that's right. The
whole
British
step
high
higher.
voices.
Strangle you.
When Morning Gilds the Sky. Not many pieces available for that tune. Songs of Praise the Angels Sang, which maybe less one. But anyway, that's the collection, and I find that that was again a discovery for me. Now on my list, as we're coming to the end of our time, there are a couple of other websites which these are the ones I selected out of many that are out there. You Google free organ music, you'll come up with lots. The only thing I would say about some of these websites, the loc.gov is the Library of Congress. And you can find quite a lot of organ music in there. It tends to be in old original manuscript condition, but if you want something really obscure, that's the place to find it. And I think some of the old American music, I don't know, people like William Billings and some of that you'll probably find at the Library of Congress. Besides which, it's a great website just to trawl around anyway. Sheet Music Fox is one that I have used, and it has, again, that's one that has an app on the iPad, and is one that's useful. Its collection of organ music is not as extensive as IMSLP, but it's there and it's free, and that's one I've used. The others the other three I've listed there: freescores.com, Weezik and 8 Notes tend to make their own editions. And so I think 8 Notes is the one where people are free to publish their own organ music. And so, you know, again, sometimes if you're feeling curious, it's sometimes interesting just to find something different that someone. And if you write your own music, I don't know if anyone here writes their own music, then you can load it up onto that website and you can claim you're published these days. So, and I just at the bottom put the CPDL. Actually, I think it's cpdl.org and not .com. I think you'll find that you'll end up in some company out of Mongolia with cpdl.com, but cpdl.org. I apologise about that. And that for choral music is wonderful. So basically, the world, as they say, they have a phrase in England, I don't know if it's the phrase here, but the world is your oyster. And there's so much out there that's available. And a lot of really good music. I mean, all the organ symphonies of Charles-Marie Widor, the symphonies of Vienne, if you like French, romantic French organ music, that's all out there. And it's in some of the editions that are up to date. The Dover score collection, if you know the Dover scores, particularly things like the Widor organ symphonies, they published the first editions because they were the there. Widor then considerably altered, particularly something like the Widor Toccata, which in its first transcript, in its first edition, had a fairly tame ending. Widor revised it considerably towards the end of his life, and the library has both editions, and you can see the modern and the new, and the modern and the old. As I say, it's not. You're not going to find music by Paul Mans or music by a more modern composer, Charles Callahan or anyone like that. You're not going to find any of those composers on these sites. But I do think it's something that I don't know if some of you were probably aware of these before you came. If I've made you aware of any more, then that's wonderful. But it's been a great discovery for me. There was a very good article published even 5 years ago in the Association of Anglican Musicians Journal. And I don't know if that's available online or not, but someone, I can't remember who, he'd gone through and found all sorts of things. And it's just fun exploring.
What are you doing to keep it together? I get a lot, and then I don't, are you making books out of it? And generally, I think I'm throwing it away. I'm not doing a good job of keeping it together, which is.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, modern photocopies are wonderful things because I tend to print the sheets, and then they're used to me now going into the office and making a booklet on 1117, and that, as I say, the piece I played today at the worship service was an office photocopy of that standard piece, and it's just useful and saves a lot of money. I found some of the English organ music that I had really old editions of is now some of the Herbert Howell's music is there. Any of you know I think today we're going to hear Isabel is going to play a piece of Herbert Howell, a wonderful English composer who wrote really, really beautiful music. And there are 3 rhapsodies he wrote, which are online as well. So there's a real variety and some surprising things. And I encourage you to go and explore. As I said to you earlier, it's not just organ music. You'll find music if any of you have to do choir work. You'll find choir things out there. You'll find instrumental music, and it's really phenomenal. So I hope that was useful. And, yeah.
You said you sort of backed away from arrangements. Is there an arrangement somewhere of the Widor's toccata?
There is.
It's not some part of the hands.
There is. And I can't remember. I think Noel Rawsthorne may have been the person that wrote it. I saw it recently again. It's
Kevin Mayhew, isn't it?
yes, Mayhew. It's in the Mayhew. It's in the Mayhew books.
I don't have very big hands. I have a hard time. I
I've never seen it. Have
Maybe
you
it was
seen it?
extremely useful. Yeah, I think it was Noah Rawsthorne wrote it. It's Vidal Toccata made simple. And it just basically uses the chords and takes away a lot of the work that's going to make your hand drop off. There is I don't know if you know, there's really quite fine, I was a little bit sniffy about it when I first saw it, and I've since been part of the performance, and it works. There was an arrangement done of Vidal Toccata with the choral, part. And I can't remember offhand who did that, but that's something that works. Maybe Jonathan Wilcox, David Wilcox. He had something to do with it, though. But
Mormon Tabernacle Choir, yeah.
It
takes
there,
a huge
and
choir.
if you've got an accompanist who can do it, then that works. That works as well. It's amazing what is out there. It really is. So,
Who did you say did the choral?
I don't know.
I think it is Wilcox.
It is Wilcox.
Yeah,
It's
I'm
Jonathan
pretty sure,
Wilcox, yeah.
Or Dave.
You can find it on
Or
YouTube.
David.
I think it's David, yeah.
Maybe David
Yeah.
Wilcox did it.
They
Thank
have
you.
150
'Cause
people
I think
in your
there's-
choir at least.
Yeah.
Don't do 25. Don't.
It's a nice piece.
It is. It works.
If you've got
I was,
150
again,
people,
something I looked at and thought, oh, I don't
Yeah.
think I'd ever do that. And then I was involved in the performance, and I thought, well, I had to admit that it worked, and I learned my lesson.
The organ still shines and the choir
It does.
shines. It really, it's good.
I mean, you've probably all been in that place where your brain tells you something's not going to work, but it does.
That's right.
That happens to me several times. So I try and keep a very open mind. So some of these composers on here that you'll find, some of the Victoriana that's there, if the music is played well, it speaks.